Today, the Ship of Theseus, if I'm saying that right, and Mariology, if I'm saying that right. Things I could have looked up and decided to pronounce correctly and not mispronounce if I had put the time and research into it, but I'm just winging it, like always. Okay, so, if you've not heard of these things, basically Mariology is just the study of parts from a whole, and the Ship of Theseus is like a thought experiment, discussed all the way back from John Locke and Thomas Hobbes and Plato and I forget the dude, but I mean back to the times of Plato, right? Like this is a thought experiment that's been discussed and thought about and written about and expanded upon for quite a long time. Plato's been around a little bit, so if you don't know the Ship of Theseus, I'm going to relate this to the human, right? Well, the Ship of Theseus was just basically the thought experiment of like, hey, there's a ship, and this is the original ship, but then it went out and it came back and it needs basically repairs or upgrades or whatever. Over time, let's just say that all the parts are repaired. Is it still the Ship of Theseus? Like, is it still that ship? Like, when it's a completely different ship now? Like, it's been repaired, even if they had no updates. What if it looked exactly the same, but stuff got worn out and then it got replaced and it's newer, right? A really, really, really easy way to look at this. I mean, the Ship of Theseus is good because these parts would get replaced gradually over time, right? Whereas, and there's many parts, like hundreds of parts, hundreds of planks of wood and whatever else, hardware that could get replaced. But we could just compare this to grandfather's axe is another way to think of it. You have this family heirloom of grandfather's axe. And, something happens and the head needs to get replaced. So you replace the head. And then something happens and then the handle needs to get replaced. Well, there's the only two parts of that axe. Like, that's it. Is it still grandfather's axe or not? Like, you completely replaced the parts. Like, he hasn't touched either of those parts. So, why would it be grandfather's axe anymore? It wouldn't really be. It's an extreme example in order to draw this, to gap. So, in relating that to a person, sometimes people say, like, oh, man, like, you're not John, or, I mean, they don't say this to me, but I mean, like, thinking, like, I like the old John, and that implies that there's a new John, or you would say, like, that this isn't you, and it's like, well, no, this is me, and that's what I really want to get at. When people say, like, this isn't you, this is not like you, and whatever, it's like, hey, this is not like the me that you knew, the last time we talked, or the one that you thought you knew at all. Like, it's different. Like, what if someone's, like, a psychopath or something, right? And, like, this is the real them, it's just that it's not the them that they showed you. And maybe now you caught them in a lie or something, and it's like, no, I've been doing this for years and years and years, this is who I am, this is what I do, you just realized it. Big difference between this not being me and you just not knowing who I am. Huge difference. But also, people change, right? And those are these two sides of this thing. It's like, I am still me, and I feel like I thought that this conversation would have some more depth to it, but I mean, I guess it's so obvious that maybe it's not going to have much meat to it. I am still me. What makes me me? Basically, my DNA and a name attached to that DNA, my biology and the name attached. Because you could change my physiology, you could change my physicality. What if I get burned up in a fire and I look completely different and I lose half my weight? And, I'm not going to look anything like I did before. So, I'm still me because of, or maybe it's the soul, the thing that we can't, or my consciousness. Let's just say consciousness. Consciousness doesn't, I mean, there's a center of the brain, you know what I'm talking about, but there's no, like consciousness in and of itself is not a thing, like a toe, or an eyeball. It's not something that you can just be like, there's the consciousness. You can say that's where the consciousness lives, or these are the things that interact with the consciousness, but the consciousness in and of itself you can't just remove unless the being ceases to exist. So I think as long as that consciousness is intact, Like, and you can't even say the consciousness has to be intact in that human. No, the consciousness doesn't. I mean, what if you upload it to the cloud? What if that's what we end up doing in a couple of years? Uploading consciousness to the cloud, and I'm still me. I still have my identity. What is my identity? Even though I change, right? I change over time as a human being. Things change about me. Sometimes fundamental principles and values and standards might change over time, right? You'd be like, that's not the John I know. Like, he values art and loves the freedom to, and loves equality, or whatever. I don't know what you would say. But what if those things changed? I would just not be the one that you know. I would not be the John you know anymore. But I would still be me. My consciousness would still be the same, but it evolves and it changes. It's there's a plasticity to it, just like the brain. There's plasticity there. There's forgetting things and there's learning new things. There's making choices and deciding to rewire your synapses, like by making different choices often, and therefore it becomes routine and Pavlovian, right? So that's a thing that could happen, right? But I would still be me. My physical being could be incredibly different or non-existent at all. And my consciousness is that one little spark that we can't seem to touch. That we don't, you can't, here's the thing. You can't create a new consciousness. As of right now, you can't. Not one that is completely autonomous and has the same qualities that we seem to recognize in a human being who has freedom of thought and action and well, a conscience, right? To a degree, anyway. Because you can create artificial intelligence, but we still don't necessarily equate that with consciousness yet. I don't think. I think that could be said that we don't equate that with consciousness yet because it's not perfected. It's not there yet. It doesn't have its own identity. But if you can create an AI with its own identity, then I mean that's the thing. Then it ceases. Then consciousness or soul or whatever you want to call it, this thing that makes me me, which I'm defining what makes me me as that thing, not my body, but the things that I think and feel. That is incredibly unique to the individual. So, and I was saying, like, one thing that's so unique and magical about it is that you can't create it. It's just something that's there, that spark is just given. It's like a big bang in every human being. And not something you can, again, go ahead and decide to create on your own. I mean, we can't necessarily create a heart, but we can do a heart transplant. And maybe we can create a heart at this point. I guess we can. We can do artificial pumps and valves and all this other junk. Artificially, I mean, but giving it its own life. I mean, people. I don't know. I should have done more research on the medical side of this and what we can and can't do. However, I don't even think we can transplant consciousness yet, because again, we can't necessarily create consciousness yet to the degree that it should be held up to, and we can't transplant consciousness. I mean, what would that even... Or can we transplant... What does it mean to transplant consciousness, right? Like, would we have to take the whole brain of someone and put it in someone else? You know what I mean? Like, we can alter consciousness, or at least we can alter mood. We can, there's the amygdala and other things, and you could, like... There's lobotomies that have been happening for forever, right? For decades and I don't know how many, maybe centuries in a crude manner. I mean, I guess it's crude no matter what. It's not really a sophisticated way to do a lobotomy, I think. Anyway, but you can definitely alter those things. But even then, it's really difficult to alter it with purpose. So I'm going really far out there from my original point. But I think that with the Ship of Theseus and how that compares to humans, I think that obviously we can replace parts. You lose an arm and you grab a new one and whatever. Maybe we can even regrow it from our own flesh, but it's still not exactly the same, right? So, I mean, forget the fact that it could be an artificial arm or whatever. let's say it just grew back, or they just like gave you something and it just like used your own cells and you could regrow it and it's fully functioning. It's not exactly the same. The time and place is different. Its origins are different. It's not the same thing. However, I remain the same. Like, that's the thing, is that you could replace all my parts other than my consciousness, and I would be the same. But what if you could duplicate my consciousness? That's the thing with uploading to the cloud, right? That is transference. That is transporting. What's the word I'm looking for? Transplanting consciousness. That would be an exercise in doing that, right? And then, I mean, if you could do that to the cloud, you could maybe find a way to do that into someone else. Because if you can take it out of me, you can probably input it too. If there's an output, there's probably a way to input. So you could probably do that, and you could trade consciousness with people in a way. But again, can you duplicate it? Can you just copy and paste that? And if you can copy and paste it, then we get into cloning. And then we get into, like, well, the original thing versus the thing that's not original. And this kind of reminds me of the movie The Prestige. And if you haven't seen it, you should freaking see it, because it is really good. It is insanely a good movie. A freaking fantastic movie. Other than the, people starring in it, why can't I remember names right now? Anyway, it also has David Bowie, who plays Tesla. So, think about that, because that's pretty rad. Anyway, but it reminds me of the movie The Prestige, and I just realized this isn't a movie review. I don't care if it's a spoiler or not. If you want to watch the movie Prestige, I guess stop here for like a minute or two. But it reminds me, because there is a cloning element to that movie, and it's like, what does it mean to be the original? What and is there like a... Oh, man, this is gonna go... It doesn't matter. This is going off the deep end. This is going way too far out there. But that's the thing. Like, if you can duplicate yourself and clone your consciousness, it wouldn't matter if it's in the same body or not. But the thing is that, are you aware that you're the original when you talk to... Like, I mean, every consciousness would think it is the original, right? Just like AI might think that it's not... Like, if it passed the Turing test and whatever... I mean, now I'm just thinking of... I'm making links here, people. Now I'm thinking of... Oh man, I can't remember anything right now. Oh, I don't even remember the... Oscar Isaac is in it. And this dude who's also in an episode of Black Mirror. Oh, it's right there, Ex Machina. So that's another fantastic, amazing movie. It's like in my top 20 films. But yeah, so even in that, it plays with this thing of the Turing test and like with artificial intelligence and consciousness and whatever else, and like... How do you know that you're real? What does being real even mean? When someone brings the concept to you, I mean, like, that's the thing. We could all be in the simulation theory for all we know, and whatever else, and we think that we're conscious and real, and maybe we're not, and but then we get into the thing of, like, perception is reality, so who cares? Ugh. What a mess. What a mess I've made here today. But, I mean, like, I came to my conclusion, I guess, like, in the first couple minutes of this. I think that if our consciousness... But then what if it's altered? I guess that's the thing. Like, if our consciousness... I mean, our consciousness evolves anyway. Our consciousness changes. We have different values and standards than we did 10 years ago, hopefully. I mean, some people's don't. And I think that's a problem. But, I mean, hopefully things are shifting and things are changing because you're learning and growing. You've had experiences, you reflect on those, you process things, and you make changes. And therefore, you're not the same person you were... I mean, arguably, you're not the same person you were a second ago. But, I mean, longer-term stuff, you're not the same person you were, 10 years ago, or 5 years ago, or 1 year ago. Because you've made changes, you've done things, you've had experiences, you feel differently about things. Things affect you. So you're never the same person. But there's still your consciousness that's there, so you are... We just label you as this thing for... or this person with a name for convenience. And, I don't know, I guess that's the standard that we have. But you should never expect anyone to stay the same, or expect them to be who you want them to be, right? And that's the tricky thing, too, is like you're hoping that the people you choose to spend time with learn and grow and process things and have experiences, and how they handle their experiences are going to be similar to yours. Similar enough that at the end of the day, you would still choose to spend your time with them. yeah. Ship of Theseus, consciousness, cloning, I'm out.